Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we got a couple of things to get into, especially reacting to the Orlando Magic's loss to the Memphis Grizzlies in London to wrap up their European trip. But before we get into that, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic pods here on the YouTube platform. Shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the podcast. Hit the QR code right here. Yep, right here, and use promo code BasketballFan for $75 added after your first $5 entry is placed. Again, promo code BasketballFan at Underdog Fantasy. Use the QR code right here, or you could use the link in description down below. Again, shout out to Underdog Fantasy. Talk about them a little bit later on. Let's go ahead and get to this game, though. Magic run the fade with the Memphis Grizzlies in London after the big dub. Close victory, but big dub over the Grizzlies in Berlin. They take it across the pond, head to London. Ja Morant comes back. He plays in this game. Has 24 in the game. And the Grizzlies got out to a hot start, something that the Orlando Magic are very used to allowing to happen throughout the season. We'll get into that a little bit later on, but all I will say is first quarter, Memphis wins 40-23. Moving forward, the Orlando Magic essentially played this game as even as it gets. What I mean by that is the Orlando Magic lost the first quarter by 17 points. The Orlando Magic lost the game, 126-109 by the way, by 17 points. The Orlando Magic played the Memphis Grizzlies to an absolute standstill beyond the first quarter. But they got blitzed in the first quarter. And that essentially cost them this game. This difference came simply down to the Orlando Magic getting off to a very cold start, and understandably so to a certain extent, right? Obviously, this is a team coming off an emotional high of everything building up through, leading up to that first Memphis Grizzlies game, of course, capped up by by having a big win in Berlin. 1,000,001 things go right. Paolo Banchero plays really well. Franz Wagner plays well for his first game back. Also, Anthony Black has arguably the dunk of the year. All emotions are riding high, and I think this is one of those situations where for a young basketball team, they allowed themselves to be overtaken by the momentum that they had coming off of the previous game. A couple of notable things here. Paolo Banchero, 16 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists, 7 of 20 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3. Funny enough, this stat line would have probably landed a lot better when I did my segment last week where I kind of formulated my entire Underdog Fantasy bet placement around Paolo Banchero doing well, but not insanely crazy. This is a bit more of the kind of game. Franz Wagner, 14 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 5 of 13 from the field, 0 of 2 from 3. Wendell Carter Jr. and Anthony Black combined for, 37, 9 rebounds, 10 assists. Also, shout out to Wendell Carter Jr. 4 of 7 from beyond the arc. Easily the best three-point shooter of the night. Desmond Bane, only 11 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 of 12 from the field. Very confused. Very, very much confused about what the circumstances with Desmond Bane was over this 2-game stretch. Did not play well in either game against the Memphis Grizzlies, quite frankly. In this one, of course, finished the game with 11. In the game prior, finished the game with 13. Shot a combined 9 of 25 over the course of those 2 games. 2 of 9 from beyond the arc. Not sure if that was just the jitters. Don't know if that was the confidence in a really weird spot at the time of going up against his former team. Maybe because it was their former team. Maybe because it was his former team, there was a certain aspect of schematically just being able to make him play out of his element. Not necessarily sure what the deal was with that one. But the Orlando Magic were able to keep Jaren Jackson Jr. under a bit more control after absolutely erupting the game prior. In 30 minutes, only had 17 points, 5 rebounds. One steal, two blocks. John Moran, of course, as I mentioned beforehand, 24 and 13. Big X factor for them in terms of allowing them to get up and down the floor in this game as far as pace of play. That stood out to me in the fact that they just were able to get to the paint so much more frequently in this game. Points off turnover, they scored 16. Fast break points, they scored 10. Nothing necessarily insane here. And if you really think about it, when you look at everything across the board for this Orlando Magic team, they didn't really lose in any true category. I mean, yes, they were outshot from beyond the arc, but it was 13 of 35 for 37% from Memphis, as opposed to 10 of 33 for Orlando, 30%. The Magic made more off of their free throws, got to the free throw line 9 times less, but they hit 94%. Memphis Grizzlies, 17 of 25. Rebounding battle, nearly even. Offensive rebounding battle, favored the Magic. Assists, nearly even. Steals, leaned in the favor of the Memphis Grizzlies. I think that was the biggest thing, was active hands playing more in space. Turnovers, that was a big thing too. Memphis Grizzlies, only 12 turnovers. Orlando Magic, 17. Now, points off of turnovers was relatively even, so it worked itself out. Second chance points also favored the Orlando Magic. Again, I think this all comes down to the Orlando Magic played a good enough basketball game to win if you were only counting the last 3 quarters. But unfortunately, there's a 4 quarter basketball game that was played, and in this situation, they did not they did not come out firing the way they needed to. And that actually brings me to my next point. These slow starts continue to cost the Orlando Magic so much. This is a resilient basketball team. We've talked about this on the podcast time and time again, how resilient this basketball team can be as far as being able to show up specifically in the third and fourth quarter of basketball games throughout this year. Of course, has, I believe, anywhere, I believe they have 6 game winners so far this season, 6 game winning shots so far this season. I believe a handful from Paolo Banchero, a handful from Desmond Bain. I believe also Franz Wagner has one of them as well. So that's at least 5 right there. Um, and that's a great thing for a young basketball team to be able to dig deep and find that. But quite frankly, this team is 9-9 since Franz Wagner went down with injury. Hadn't been able to put 2 back-to-back victories together since the back end of November. I believe their last back-to-back victory ended on December 1st. So in the year of 2026, which obviously we're not too deep in, but nonetheless we are 2 weeks into, this team has went up until the Berlin victory almost a month and a half without being able to put 2 games back to back. Nearly 20 whole games of not being able to put back-to-back games together. And I think that this matchup in London is a further representation of that, in the sense of this team still is struggling to put it together over the course of a handful of games. Now, the funny thing about this team is we're going to learn a lot about the Orlando Magic in a moment, because the truth of the matter is that January is almost over, and the stretch that they have to close out January is a very interesting one. Of course, they come back home to face a very solid Charlotte Hornets team that has LaMelo Ball playing a much more efficient basketball right now. Colin Knippel looks like one of the best rookies, if not the best rookie from the 2025 class, and they're playing at a good pace, despite the fact that there's still some question marks as far as what they can do defensively and things of that nature. I know their ranking has them 12th in the Eastern Conference, but as far as a legitimate basketball team, Charlotte is playing good basketball. They're on the high of LaMelo Ball crossing, I believe he's in the 30s in terms of games played so far this year, which is big for him with the way that he's had his injury concerns. Again, Colin Knippel's been solid. I believe Miles Bridges just jumped into third in Charlotte Hornets history as far as scoring is concerned, that leaderboard. But then also 2 very, very big games against the Cleveland Cavaliers back to back on Saturday, and then that following Monday, January 26th. Then at the Miami Heat, who have not been playing their best basketball as of late, but are starting to stir the troops a little bit more with the fact that Bam Adebayo is starting to get it together offensively. And Khalil Ware has been in and out as far as his productivity, but I feel like a lot of the conversations around him as of late are only going to further stir him in the right direction. So he's going to start to catch fire, I believe, as well. And then they end the month off facing off at home against the Toronto Raptors, who have also played some pretty good basketball as well, sit fourth in the Eastern Conference, and are kind of poised to make a move as far as the trade deadline is concerned too. Wouldn't even be surprised if by the time the Orlando Magic play the Raptors that they maybe even make a trade that maybe upgrades them in one way or another. After that, I mean, I mean, February starts off pretty wicked. On the road at the Spurs, on the road at Oklahoma City. Like, there's a West Coast trip later on in February that goes Kings, Suns, Clippers, Lakers, and then come home to play the Rockets. Like, this next 5 game stretch to end January, it needs to be a true confidence booster for this Orlando Magic team, because January was the month to like really start to get things together, and they broke even. They broke even this far into January. So now they have a 5 game sample size left of the month of January to make the most out of the situation they're in. Because this is a team that needs to be able to gain some real momentum, because February is not going to be kind to them. And quite frankly, the month of March is going to have its own question marks as well. A lot of road games in the month of March. And more specifically, there are a lot of Western Conference matchups that are going to stand out in the month of March. February and March, the intensity is going to pick up by a decent amount. The ability for this young basketball team to be able to kind of get themselves back on the right track during these last 5 games, I think is going to be crucial. The main thing for me, too, is that this Orlando Magic team has to be able to start games with more urgency. And funny enough, Paulo Banchero speaks on this after the Orlando Magic game. And, I mean, he does. And I think Jamal Mosley also kind of touched on some of the net positives of this team after the win over Memphis on Thursday's game. But let's actually start with that, right? Jamal Mosley says, I think we played too slow. This is coming after the Berlin win. They got out in transition a ton. We missed a ton at the rim, which led to fast breaks for them. We've just got to do a better job, 1, finishing at the rim, and 2, knocking our shots down. But then it's got to be a clear sprint to get back in transition, knowing this is a team that wants to get out and run. And I think the Orlando Magic did a pretty good job of responding in the right ways as far as dealing with that. In this game, again, limited the fast break points to a very significant degree. I think they actually did pretty decent in that regard. But this is a team that I feel like, again, that's where the urgency aspect comes into play. I think this is a team that just truly, truly needs to put themselves in a position to play hard. Not even put themselves in position. This team needs to play hard at all times. Here's something I thought was really interesting that Jamal Mosley said after Sunday's loss, which is, we didn't start out right. We didn't start out the right way. Similar to the last game, the lead got so far ahead, we couldn't crawl our way back into this one. Our sense of urgency to start the game, they hit some shots. They come out strong and fast. They've done that since we've been playing. We have to understand how we've got to come out with that sense of urgency. Again, remember, I mentioned this to you guys after the Thursday victory. This is a team that I don't believe deserved to call Thursday's win anything more than a moral victory. Yes, it was a W on the stat sheet, but that was a game that was more of a win is a win. Not necessarily the idea that this team truly did anything special. Yes, shout out to Paulo Banchero for his game. Yes, glad to see Franz Wagner back on the floor playing at a good level. And again, Anthony Black, big time dunk, had an overall outstanding game. But this was a game that the Orlando Magic simply should have won and should have won handily. Instead, it was much more close than it should have been, and that showed in this back-to-back matchup, because they played the exact same team, with the only change being Ja Morant added back into the fray, and not that that's some minute addition. This is a former All-Star point guard we're talking about here, right? But that one addition, paired with essentially playing the exact same way as you did in Berlin, without the Berlin crowd on your side, without the Berlin crowd in your favor, netted a completely different result, one that arguably could have been the result of the game in Berlin had a few things went differently. Paulo Banchero mentioned something after the game that I thought was pretty interesting. He said, I think we're together in terms of the guys in the locker room. I think we all trust each other and have each other's back. Later in the season, heading into this back half, we need to find a way to string some consistent basketball together and get wins. Hopefully, we can go on a streak here. We're right in the middle of the standings. That can do a lot for us. I think we all know that. The name of the game, the word of the year for the Orlando Magic, as far as how they've genuinely played. The word of the year coming into the season for them was aggression. And I think some players have maximized that philosophy, while I think others have struggled to truly make the most out of being a more aggressive basketball team. The true representation of this team in one word has been inconsistency. That shows in their record. That shows in their inability to put together wins back to back. It shows in their inability to get consistent performances from their star guys, a la Desmond Bane, who, again, I mentioned, I think has been in a really interesting spot where he did not play very well against his former team at all in two games that I thought would have been really great opportunities for him to show what they are missing after moving him. And this is something that I thought was quite the surprise, given the fact that if you really think about it, Desmond Bane, who has been our most consistent player, before this Memphis Grizzlies pair, had two of his, better games or better pair of games with Philly and New Orleans back to back. 23 points against Philly, 27 points against New Orleans. Although the three ball did not land, did a really good job of getting to the free throw line, 13 of 13. 13 of 13 from the free throw line combined over those two games. Only got to the free throw line 4 total times in the two games against Memphis. Like, the inconsistencies have shown through Paulo Banchero's play. They've shown through Desmond Bane's play. They've shown through the injuries causing Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, Mo Wagner, all to miss time. Anthony Black has missed games this season. Wendell Carter Jr. has missed games this season, right? The name of this year, the key word of this year for the Orlando Magic has been inconsistency. And I think these slow starts show you the difference even between the first quarter, the second quarter, and the rest of the game, or the first quarter and the rest of the game, second through fourth, a la this game, where the first quarter they're blown out by 17 points, go on to play the Memphis Grizzlies at a complete standstill, auto even, right? The whole rest of the game. If that first quarter is any closer, this game is either closer in reach for the Orlando Magic to potentially steal the victory or at least force overtime, just based off the way the game played out the rest of the way along. Inconsistency is going to be the biggest thing that hurts this Orlando Magic team, and I fear that even if it's one of those situations where they figure it out, it's going to be one of them where they have to figure it out sooner rather than later. Because the postseason, they're not going to have... Think about the idea of playing a team in a 7-game series very similar to what this was with the Memphis Grizzlies, playing 2 games basically back-to-back. In a 7-game series, the Orlando Magic could have easily been down 0-2. If you go based off of how they played the Grizzlies, quote-unquote, in Game 1, and then how one quarter of basketball essentially cost them Game 2 of the series, if you look at it that way, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, this Orlando Magic team is going to have to find themselves within some level of consistency, and they're going to have to do it very, very soon. Very, very soon. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you could win up to 5,000 times your cash. Today, We're going to focus on the MLK Day game, the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Atlanta Hawks. And we're so used to Trae Young being in this game, he unfortunately will not be now a member of the Washington Wizards. Nonetheless, still think this should be a big game across the board. Gonna take Giannis Antetokounmpo over 0.5 on the double double. I honestly think Giannis is going to have like 27 and 13. I think he's going to have a really good game against an Atlanta Hawks defense that is spurring. They are not that good as far as rim protection. I think that's going to favor Giannis Antetokounmpo both on the offensive and defensive glass. Going to take Giannis for an automatic double-double higher than 0.5 on the double-double. So I'm taking it for an auto double-double. On the other side of that matchup, gonna go with somebody who I think should ball out in this game in Jalon Johnson. 38.5 points, rebounds, assists. I'm gonna go higher on this one. Think that he should have a really solid game. Wouldn't even be surprised if just off of points and rebounds that Jalon Johnson was able to get around 38. That's what, 27 and 11. I think that if you add in a couple of assists here and there, he actually smashes the higher on this one. So higher on 0.5 double-double for Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think it's an automatic double-double for him. And I'm also going to go with Jalon Johnson, who I think could have a double-double in this game as well. Higher on 38.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Download the app today and use promo code BASKETBALLFAN to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Again, use promo code BASKETBALLFAN to get $75 in bonus entries after placing your first 5. Underdog, more picks, and make some money. Shout out again to Underdog Fantasy per usual.
Must be 18 plus. 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska. 19 plus in Colorado for some games. 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-878 or text HOMI 467-369.
Now we have to talk about something that I think is pretty interesting. It does not necessarily associate with the Orlando Magic directly, but you guys know every now and then, especially when it's a slow week, and the Orlando Magic, of course, don't play again until Thursday. So again, we have nearly a week of basketball that we have to wait on before we see the Orlando Magic suit up again. But the conversation around Giannis Antetokounmpo was an interesting one. And I think that's part of what, fueled me into using the MLK game and leaning on Giannis as part of the Underdog Fantasy bet placement of the day. Again, use this QR code right here. News says that the likelihood that Giannis Antetokounmpo will be moved at this trade deadline feels very unlikely. There's a couple of teams that could have a much more improved trade package if Giannis Antetokounmpo were to be moved in the summertime, where teams would have more access to further draft picks. You think about a team like the Los Angeles Lakers, who only have the ability to trade maybe one first-round pick as of right now, but could accumulate up to 2 to 3 potential first-round picks to move off of if we can get to we being them, being the summer, get to the summer, right? That's a team to watch. The Atlanta Hawks are a team that has been brought up as a potential trade partner for the for the Memphis Grizzlies as well. The Miami Heat, of course, as well. A handful of these teams seem to want to stand pat and wait until they have a much better trade package to maybe truly convince the Milwaukee Bucks to come up off of Giannis. Because right now, there's no trade. Of course, there's no true trade package that can equivocate to that, is equivalent to trading a Giannis Antetokounmpo. Right? You're not going to, as the Milwaukee Bucks, you're not going to win any deal that involves moving off of Giannis Antetokounmpo. Do I believe that the Atlanta Hawks, as currently situated, may have the best overall opportunity to land someone like Giannis, given that they have not only their own draft capital, but they also have the New Orleans Pelicans draft capital as well? Yes. I also think there's something that has to be said for the fact that, if you remember, the Atlanta Hawks also have been in a really good position because of what they've been able to do with past trades like DeJounte Murray from the Spurs and different things like that. There's been a lot of, and then being able to reflip him to the New Orleans Pelicans and things of that nature. Like they've been able to put themselves in a really good spot as far as accumulating talent. Of course, they have Zachary Ricochet, a former number one overall pick as well. All of this to say that specifically focusing on the Eastern Conference teams, the three teams that came up were the Knicks, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Miami Heat. How I feel like this has to be discussed from an Orlando Magic perspective is specifically the New York Knicks and the Atlanta Hawks more so. This is a representation of the kind of thing I mean when I say that the Orlando Magic are on borrowed time. Any misconception that this Orlando Magic team, because of how youthful they are, is going to allow them to have some significant window really like devalues the understanding that the Eastern Conference is going to get better overnight after this season is over. There is a world where Jason Tatum is back healthy on a Boston Celtics team that is actively trying to be aggressive in the trade market, has Jaylen Brown playing like an MVP candidate, and they are currently a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference. The Indiana Pacers may get a number 1 to number 3 overall pick in this upcoming NBA draft and land Cameron Boozer, Darren Peterson, or AJ DeBonsa. And add that to an elite point guard in Tyrese Halliburton. Not to mention that they could move off of someone like Benedict Mathurin to shore up their center position even more. You have Pascal Siakam. And that's a team that's coming off of back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals, as well as making an NBA Finals that they pushed the Oklahoma City Thunder to Game 7 when fully healthy. The Detroit Pistons look like they are here to stay and could make a move on the margins using Jaden Ivey and or Tobias Harris to be able to go get an upgrade at the small forward position. Like the Miami Heat, or let's look at the New York Knicks, right? The New York Knicks there's a world where the New York Knicks could flip out Karl Anthony Towns and draft capital and add that to Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, as a team that's already a top 3, top 5 team in the Eastern Conference when fully healthy. Of course, they're dealing with some injuries right now with Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart particularly. But this is a team that if you switch out Karl Anthony Towns for Giannis Antetokounmpo, like I think a lot of people would put them as the odds-on favorites. Let's look at the Atlanta Hawks. If you're able to switch out Zachary Ricochet and maybe you trade the New Orleans Pelicans pick, which is a very high-value pick, but this is Giannis Antetokounmpo we're talking about. If you're able to move that Zachary Ricochet, which is basically moving a number 1 overall pick, along with a top 3 to top 5 pick from the New Orleans Pelicans in this upcoming draft, along with filler salary, of course, you're looking at a world where the Atlanta Hawks would have Jalen Johnson next to Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dyson Daniels, like maybe Dyson Daniels. Dyson Daniels may have to be thrown in the trade with Zachary Ricochet to make the money work, but nonetheless, right? You're looking at a team that like could really be a force very, very quickly. They look kind of sputtering right now, but they look again. They have expiring money with Corey Kispert and CJ McCollum both set to come off their books at the end of the year. That's going to open up real space for them to sign guys to put around someone like a Giannis Antetokounmpo if they were to make that trade. I mean, even if you want to use the Miami Heat one, right? There's a world where you have like Giannis next to Bam Adebayo. Even this season, let's talk about this year in particular. Let's say that all of this is true. Giannis doesn't get moved. The Milwaukee Bucks have been one of the most aggressive teams in the trade market that we have seen out of anybody as far as the reports are concerned. Zach LaVine, Jeremy Grant, Andrew Wiggins, right? They are a team that is actively trying to go get real talent to put around him Malik Monk and Keon Ellis have come up. Like, this is a team in the Milwaukee Bucks that even this season could be a danger to the Orlando Magic because they are aggressive. They are aggressively trying to build around Giannis. So whether the Giannis situation comes to roost this year or next year, the truth of the matter is that this entire situation fully encapsulates to me how the Orlando Magic need to really become self-aware of where they stand in the pecking order of the Eastern Conference, because the truth of the matter is that everybody around them is being aggressive in one way, shape, or form as far as their ability to upgrade their roster, whether that's simply getting healthier if you're a team like Indiana or the Celtics, or making a move that's going to boost their talent pool, like Miami, who's been going after Ja Morant, or like the Milwaukee Bucks, who are looking to try to make a trade on the margins to help them out, right? Orlando is kind of stuck in quicksand because they can't make too many splash moves that don't involve them having to move a core player. This entire section is meant to be a forewarning, essentially, saying that the Orlando Magic are in a really interesting spot because they're youthful, but they're a team that shows that clearly if your flaws are significant enough, it only takes 1 year for you to be in a much different place than you expected. Right? The Indiana Pacers lose Tyrese Halliburton, and they go from a team that played in the Eastern Conference Finals back-to-back years to a team that might be picking at the top of the lottery. This Orlando Magic team does not have the draft capital after moving for Desmond Bane to afford a hiccup year like that. Right? They're in a very similar situation to a team like the Atlanta Hawks. Not even really them, because they have their draft capital for this season. If not for through themselves, the New Orleans Pelicans pick alone is huge. Actually, I would make the argument that Orlando is in a very similar situation to like where Milwaukee is. Like, the team you got is the team you got. Now, the youth and athleticism is much better than what Milwaukee has been dealing with, and that helps them in a big way. But other than that, the team is what it is, barring a few things on the margins, unless you're willing to make a tough decision like the Milwaukee Bucks did with Jrue Holiday. This Giannis thing sets a real precedent. The Eastern Conference is not going to get any easier. Honestly, I think the likelihood that Giannis stays in the Eastern Conference, if I had to put a percentage on it, would be like 75% that I think he's going to be in the East still, even if it's not on the Milwaukee Bucks this upcoming summer. So put Giannis Antetokounmpo in a different situation, rejuvenated around a better basketball team, paired with the Detroit Pistons are coming, right? The Boston Celtics have been here. Indiana should get back in the fray. The Cleveland Cavaliers, even if they decide to make a drastic move, it's probably going to involve them trying to do something that fully optimizes their roster around Donovan Mitchell. Like, the East is not getting any easier. So this Giannis thing might not rear its ugly head this season, but this is a forewarning to the Orlando Magic that you don't have as much time as you think you have if you're if you truly view yourself as this like championship caliber team with like a young core that is going to be a perennial playoff team and be in the mix for an ECF every single year. Like, I think they have the talent for it, but I don't think that window is as wide open as the Orlando Magic sometimes treat it like it is. Last but not least, let's react to some of the comments that you guys dropped last episode. A lot of these came from Berto the Magician. I'm going to read these all in together. I agree. This win feels deflated, but if we go up from here, then we're all good. Well, unfortunately, Berto, we lost to the Memphis Grizzlies the very next game in London. So we'll have to see. Also said I was shocked. I was in shock with how insane Triple J was hitting contest after contest. This would have been a blowout, but that dude was frying. Also interesting, the thought on that because guess what ended up being a blowout as soon as Ja Morant came in and was able to kind of help with them getting that hot start and then keep things afloat the rest of the game. Yes, the Orlando Magic played them at a standstill for 3 quarters, but guess what that meant? That also the Memphis Grizzlies played at a very consistent pace throughout the entirety of the game. And it's just the fact that the first quarter creates so much of a deficit that the Orlando Magic were not able to recover in the same way they did in the game in Berlin. Last but not least, Berto said, "What do you think about us trading Jonathan Isaac and Tyus Jones to the Bucks for Cole Anthony and Bobby Portis?" Would love that. Would love that. Love that more for Bobby than I do Cole. I miss Cole. I think Cole would be a more consistent offensive threat off the bench than Tyus. I also see a world where, truthfully, I just believe if we're going to move off of Tyus, I would just like to give the reins to Jace Richardson, not necessarily make a bit of a lateral move to Jace and bringing in Cole back. I feel like bringing Cole back is going to bump Jace Richardson down in the pecking order unnecessarily for two guys that do very similar things. Um, so I feel like if you're gonna move off of Tyus, I think it's with the anticipation that you're looking to open a more free reign for Jace to get more minutes off the bench, not necessarily to redistribute those minutes to someone like Cole Anthony who feels more like a lateral move. If that was a move to land Malik Monk, for example, who I do think is an upgrade over Jace right now, it's a little different. But I feel like, and maybe this is disrespectful to Cole Anthony. I don't mean to be too disrespectful at least. But I do feel like for what I think the upside of Jace Richardson is that bringing back Cole would stunt Jace Richardson's growth in favor of essentially making a move that's lateral in comparison to just giving Jace more minutes. Bobby, though, on the other hand, of course, does not have the defensive upside of Jonathan Isaac, but I think offensively is much more of a contributor. What he can do as an offensive rebounder, what he can do in the mid range area as a jump shooter, I think could be huge for this team as well. Could be somebody who's played small ball five for you, somebody who I think you can play next to Paolo Banchero because of his ability to step out to the 3 point line. Comes off as a very similar archetype to Wendell Carter Jr., which I think gives you a bit of a consistent look when you have Wendell on the bench. Also, just somebody that I think has the permeability to play next to all of the bigs that the Orlando Magic have outside of maybe Wendell, who I think, again, their redundancy makes it a little bit of a question mark. But I think he can play next to Paulo. I think he can play next to Goga. I think he can play next to Mo. I think he can play next to Noah. I like the idea of Bobby Portis, and that's very on the margin, but I think he would be a really good pickup for the time being. James Estrella, shout out to you. I think this is the first time I'm seeing you comment in the comment section. Says Anthony Black has arrived, most improved player of the year. He earned it. Hard work pays off. I'm right there with you. I think that Anthony Black should be right there in the conversation for most improved player. I think that the fact that Denny Avdia is missing time also opens the floodgates for someone like Anthony Black to kind of rise into the conversation. That dunk of the year nomination that he has right now, I think it's finally putting him in the spotlight again. I think if I'm Anthony Black, double down on this, bro. Continue to play very, very well, pushing into the back half of the season. The Orlando Magic are much more likely to make the playoffs than the Portland Trailblazers. Join the dunk contest, bro. Join the dunk contest. Win the dunk contest, or at least put on a really, really good show. Be a representation of an Orlando Magic franchise that has had more than their fair share of Orlando Magic players not only show up but also show out in the dunk contest on All Star Weekend. Continue to push that momentum. Sometimes for things like most improved player, you got to campaign. And the play on the court is definitely doing it. His teammates have talked about how he's improved so much this season. Jamal Mosley has talked about it. The stats show it. Continue to put yourself in the spotlight. You played in a lot of big games so far this season, had some really big moments without, Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero on the floor so far this year. I think that he deserves to be in that conversation, may even be top one, and he might even be top two and not two, that kind of thing, right? Last but not least, avid commenter, D'Lo Florida says, I've been keeping up with the Grizzlies. They have been in the fight in a lot of games. They're not just laying down because I've been in tune with them. This game went exactly how I thought it will go. The young guys they got over there have been balling, which is part of the reason they are ready to move off of Ja. I can't disagree with you too much more. Beyond just saying that I think that this is more about the Orlando Magic than it is about the Memphis Grizzlies. I think the Memphis Grizzlies are a solid basketball thing, a solid basketball team. I think with Triple J at the helm, they're a really good basketball team. You add Ja Morant to the helm of that, they're a team that you have to have a conversation about as a squad. You don't want to see in the playoffs if you're talking about the West, even right. So this is a team that yes, we know they're good. We know they're talented. We knew that with them getting Ja Morant back, even that this was going to be a team that was going to be dangerous. Which is why even though the momentum pointed in the direction of the Orlando Magic coming into that game in Berlin, I was still so fearful because I'm like, they should win. They gotta win. They're supposed to win. But that's every single reason why they should win is also the reason why I'm scared that they won't win. And that you pair all of that with the fact that Memphis is a good basketball team, and it all draws these level of concerns. But at the same time, I felt like both games, the win over Memphis and the loss to Memphis, had more to do with bad Orlando Magic than good Memphis Grizzlies. No disrespect to the Memphis Grizzlies, but I definitely think that both of those games, win and loss, had more to do with the struggles of the Orlando Magic than it had to do with the Memphis Grizzlies playing well enough to win those games, or in the case of the loss, make that game as competitive as it ended up being. With all that said, in the comment section down below, I would like you guys to answer a question that has more to do with the Giannis Antetokounmpo section of the podcast, which is, how do you guys feel as though this entire Giannis scenario affects the Orlando Magic? I feel like we've talked about a couple of different players throughout this season, Trae Young and Anthony Davis, excuse me. Trae Young and Anthony Davis are players that we've discussed this season as like where they go if they are moved. Trae Young's already been moved. Anthony Davis, there's still a possibility that he could be traded by the trade deadline. Of how that could impact the Orlando Magic as far as like if Anthony Davis were to land on a Miami Heat, or if Trae Young at the time was being discussed as a player who could be moved to um there were a handful of different situations. Obviously, the Western Conference had a couple of different names. Of course, now he plays for the Washington Wizards. They're not going to be in the mix very much, and he probably won't play very much this season. But we were talking about a handful of different scenarios where he goes could impact where the Orlando Magic end up in the standings, or what that could mean as far as facing a team that has Trae Young on it in the playoffs, stuff like that. Well, what are you guys' feelings on the Giannis Antetokounmpo situation and how that can impact the Orlando Magic, whether that's this year or next year? Interested to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section down below. With all that being said, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. Again, scan the QR code right here. Use promo code BasketballFan for $75 in bonus entries when you place your first $5 bet. And I will speak to you guys again in the next episode. But until then, peace.